He was an ugly loser loner, and I'm not talking about some of you guys. And after getting hijacked from his world with some of his classmates, all of them got hero abilities except him, just for him to later find out that he can write stuff literally in the air and it would manifest just like that. Plus he kept his loner mood, so whenever somebody asks him for help, he's just kinda like, oh, leave me alone. And it all started when one day our protagonist Hiro Okamura suddenly got transferred into another world, and it was a princess of these strange lands that summoned him and 4 of his other friends, and they were called heroes. They had no clue what was going on, and then the princess thanked them for coming, and seeing them confused, she showed them the way, telling them that the king would inform them of everything they needed to know. At that point, Okamura quickly picked up that it wasn't a dream nor an illusion, but rather a completely different world. Soon after, they arrived before the king, who thanked them for coming there, also showing understanding for their confusion. We then learned from the king that this was a human kingdom of Vikotorias, and the world's name was Idi, where he, Rudolph, was the one leading the country with his daughter by his side, the first princess Lilith, and he basically needed them to be their heroes and help them save their kingdom from the evil demon kin that were trying to destroy it. Clarification was needed, so the king continued saying that in their world there were 4 species, where besides one of them the tensions increased between the other 3, where the king of the demon king wanted them destroyed, and since humankind of this world were vastly underpowered compared to the demon kin, they needed some help from the outside, which was why they resorted to the ancient magic of hero summoning. But as it was a powerful magic, the summoning ritual failed 2 times already, where the king lost one of his daughters while the other one was in coma, and Lilith was the only one that managed to perform it successfully. Listening to this, our protagonist was sus of this king that sacrificed his daughters, man, and one of the other guys he was summoned with, named Taishi, was already on board with the king's plan, and right then the king realized that there were 5 of them where there should be only 4, and the princess assured him that they were all heroes since they all got summoned, and when each of them checked their status, of course, 4 of them confirmed their titles as heroes, while our protagonist was realizing that this world was like an RPG game as he was checking his status. And then, when the princess asked him about his title, to the king's shock, he told them, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, big surprise, that he wasn't a hero. And after a few guesses from them, our protagonist revealed that he was actually just an innocent bystander, which was his actual title, and this came as a shock to everyone there. Now imagine reincarnating in another world and being completely useless. You think this is the worst thing ever, right? No, the worst thing ever is reincarnating in another world with your friends who are all OP and you are completely useless. Oh my god, man, we're in for a rough ride with this one. We then learned that our protagonist came into the classroom just as those 4 were summoned, and Okamura confirmed it, adding that he had nothing to do with them, and he also wanted to know what they were intending to do to fix the issue. Okamura also said that even though he didn't care much about those 4, he was certain that they were summoned for the king's selfish desires and that their families were worried about them. Okay, they aren't friends but classmates, but same thing. Taishi took it as an insult that our protagonist spoke about his classmates as some strangers, but our protagonist told him that they never spoke before and it wasn't their choice to be in the same classroom anyway. Our protagonist then told the king that he was unnecessary there, as he, as a regular person, couldn't be expected to fight against some demons, and he wanted to go back to his world, and the king told him that only the king of the demon king had that kind of power. The hero boy Taishi said that they'd just take out the demon king in that case, but our protagonist was thinking to himself that he was a dumbo for thinking it was necessary for them to return. The princess then tried convincing them that their world was wonderful and that they would be considered their family, and when one of the hero girls, Chika, expressed her worry about her family, the princess casually said that it was no biggie since the memory of their past existence was erased anyway, and this utterly shocked the 4 young heroes. Don't worry, your family is not gonna miss you because they have completely forgotten about you. Don't worry, everything is fine. Oh my god. Seeing the girls Shuri and Shinobu worried, the princess told them that it was okay as everything would go back to normal once they returned. Hearing this, our protagonist was even more sus that all they've been told thus far were all lies and that there was no way for them to go back to their world actually, but he was fine with that as we could see that he didn't have the easiest life and that he was a loner. Taishi then said that even though they were summoned for selfish reasons, they were willing to do their mission, and the girls also agreed, which made the king happy. Our protagonist then told him that he'd go his own way since he wasn't a hero and he couldn't go back to his world, but Taishi grabbed him by his arm and scolded him for not feeling obligation to at least try helping the people there. But our protagonist just refused it, and one of the girls then told Taishi that they could do it by themselves, as Okamura would be risking his life without any special status, which was unfair. And even though reluctantly, Taishi let it go, and our protagonist wished them the best of luck as he left the place, with the princess drastically apologizing as he was walking by her. I mean, this is not too bad. All of them are kind of feeling bad for him and apologizing for getting him into this mess. While usually they would summon him, realize he has no powers, and just ordered him exiled or killed. So he didn't get the worst possible option after all. Now, as soon as our protagonist went outside into a busy city, he immediately started thinking that he needed to collect the info about the new place, just like you would do in a game. He opened up his status, and there he found that he had some word magic which he was clueless about, but he'd learned these things as he went along. His priority was to get some money first now, and the best way for that, just like in any other RPG game, was if he joined a guild where he could get rewards from quests and also by subjugating monsters. And right then he noticed an elderly person next to him, which seemed to be a fortune teller. The elder offered our protagonist her services, but when our protagonist refused, the elder creepily smiled and told him that she knew that Okamura had questions as he was a traveler from another world, and this puzzled our protagonist. Seeing him in shock, the elder assured him that she would keep his secret. The creepy lady offered him fortune telling for free since he was a newcomer, and even though our protagonist didn't care about fortune telling, the mysterious lady already guessed correctly that he was from another world, and plus there was magic in this world, and so he gave it a shot. The mysterious lady then, looking at an orb, told him a bunch of stuff in an enigmatic way, which basically amounted to him getting some sort of powers and attracting people to himself with those powers. But hearing this, Okamura told the lady that he wasn't interested in meeting new people, but she told him that it was just one of the many possibilities. Wow, what a great fortune telling. One of the things that could happen to you in the future is that you will lose some money. Actually, it's not a possibility, it's a certain thing, because you're welcome, now pay up for my services. Anyways, the old lady also found it interesting that Okamura's world didn't have any magic, and just when our protagonist was about to leave, thanking the old lady for the info, she told him that she was happy to meet someone with such a gift that she hadn't seen in a long time. And this made our protagonist think that this mysterious lady already met someone like him before, and she confirmed it. She then told him that he could pay her a visit anytime, adding that she'd charge him the next time. And before getting charged, he learned from the lady that there indeed were guilds in the town, and not too long after, we see that Okamura already enrolled in a guild and was already getting his first quest, with a warning from the receptionist that he'd have to pay a hefty fine if he cancelled the quest he took. Okamura realized that this was really troublesome, and then since he wasn't familiar with the quest item he was supposed to collect, the receptionist took out a book and then showed him how the herb he was looking for appeared. Seeing that book, our protagonist set out a goal for himself to shut himself in a library if he got enough money. Sometimes later, we see our protagonist wrapping up his quest as he already managed to gather enough of those herbs, making this a pretty simple quest for him, and he also looked up the status of his word magic to see how it worked, where he could understand most of it besides some corrupted, unreadable text. And so then he decided to try it out, using that lady fortune teller's advice, where he'd focus on his blood flow, and now he just needed to use his finger to write a word and then actualize it. And as soon as he said activate for the word split that he wrote on a huge boulder, the huge boulder really did break into two parts, which shocked Okamura. I bet Tanjiro would be happy to have this power in his training arc. Anyways, he thought that this was a cheat as he tried a different word on another stone, and then he remembered the fortune-telling lady telling him that this unattributed power was unique and powerful, where only a few people had it, adding however that there was a big problem with its users not being able to control it fully, where in some cases they'd even die, which was the case with the two princesses. And the fortune-telling lady then said that the issue with the princesses was that they didn't fully understand the nature of their power, which caused rebound. With this information he learned from that old lady, our protagonist knew that he should be careful with his own magic until he gained more knowledge about it, and also he was limited with his level to use it more than 4 times, and so he should keep that in mind as well and level up quickly. And right then, something made noise in the bush, and just when Okamura thought that it could be the king's men, which would be bothersome, a slime came out and then launched itself at our protagonist full speed, with Okamura barely evading it. The slime then rebounded from the tree and hit our protagonist, and he immediately lost 3 HP, and so he knew that if he got hit several more times like that he'd be done for, and he wouldn't allow that. So he dashed away from the slime, and waiting for the right moment, our protagonist used his word magic to create an explosion that swiftly eliminated the slime. He was really impressed with it, as now he even understood the range of his new ability, and besides that, eliminating that slime leveled him up as well. Sometimes later, our protagonist went back to pick up his reward for completing his quest, and then after that he decided to treat himself to some delicious food, which took him through a whole seafood experience that only a foodie like him could imagine. Like, bro, imagine getting kissed by a flipping fish and stuff like that. But let's just say that he really enjoyed the meal, and he could eat a whole more of it, but he refrained as he was limited with money, and also the food he just ate was enough for him to get fully healed up. Then he went to find an inn to stay the night, with a plan to start leveling up from the next day. And the next day we see our protagonist leveling up by fighting a bunch of slime monsters, but after a while he got bored by it as he went to that forest to find some goblins, and as he was walking about thinking to himself how he was getting used to a weapon, some kind of monster leaped at him from the tree, and Okamura was able to escape it in the last moment. In front of him was the goblin he was looking for, and without much delay the goblin charged at him again with his heavy club, and our protagonist managed to defend himself with his big knife, and then after a bit of parry, our protagonist kicked the goblin with his foot, sending it back a bit, and then as goblin lost its footing, our protagonist used this opportunity and cut its head off with one smooth slash. And as our protagonist was having some moral dilemmas about what he just did, a whole bunch of other goblins showed up aggressively taunting Okamura. However, our protagonist found this convenient as he could finally test more of his word magic ability, and so he then activated his magic, which created a bunch of spikes that eliminated a lot of those goblins. Some of the goblins survived that and swiftly surrounded our protagonist, but Okamura already knew that this would happen, and then with the word extend, he made his long knife a really long sword and then slashed through the goblins that encircled him, slaughtering all of them in one single move. However, killing these many creatures didn't feel that great to our protagonist, which was a surprise to him since he always thought of himself as emotionless. And right then more of the goblins appeared, and he decided that he'd keep doing that until he felt trained enough. And sometimes later, we see Okamura trying cashing in a bunch of goblin fangs that he brought to the guild, and the receptionist there tried giving him some compliments, but Okamura just wanted to get it over with, and when he got the money, he knew that he had enough to get some equipment that he needed. And we also learned that our protagonist could use his power to clean himself as well, which was practical and also showed how limitless his ability appeared to be. And this was when it started getting really interesting for our protagonist, as he flew through the levels and in just a week reached the next rank, which got him a lot of attention among the receptionists at the guild, which he found quite bothersome. And it was also then that people started wondering where he was from, with his clothes looking pretty unusual, and this too was an issue for Okamura, who thought that a word might reach the king that then might make him work as a hero with his newfound powers. And as our protagonist was determined to leave the town by the next day, but before that he wanted to change his clothes, as besides attracting him too much attention, a school uniform didn't offer any other functions. And then next morning we see that he has already set out on a new journey, now wearing new clothes. Sometimes later, we see that our protagonist, who was now already level 18, finally arrived in a new town called Amos. And as soon as he got into the town, he noticed people giving him strange looks, which meant that they didn't like strangers there. And as he kept walking, the little girl showed up and called him, guessing that he was an adventurer, but our protagonist ignored her, which really annoyed her, and she didn't give up and kept following Okamura and asking him a bunch of questions. Okamura told her that he didn't want to answer a brat such as her, which insulted her, and despite her insistence that he stopped calling her a brat, Okamura seemed to enjoy doing it, and so he continued, and when the little girl told him that he was just like other adventurers, he too got offended offended as he then told her that he wasn't like other people. The little girl then asked him if that meant that he wouldn't terrorize the villagers like others did, and our protagonist had no clue what she was saying, but then he noticed that he wasn't the only guest in this village, as there were some other good-for-nothing adventurers that were troubling locals, taking their food without paying and such, which he could witness right there. Seeing this happen made him understand the little girl's suspicions about the new adventurers coming into their town, but just as he was about to go his way, again the little girl stopped him, asking him if he could help them out against those troublemakers, and Okamura told her that even though he was an adventurer that knew how to fight, it wasn't his job to do so, and that they could ask the heroes for that. And at that moment, the little girl's father showed up, all bandaged up, telling her, whose name we learned to be Coco. He told her to stop bothering Okamura, and he also added that he agreed with our protagonist, saying that it was hero's job, or military, to protect their town. However, Coco found this unacceptable and kept begging our protagonist, who then told her that he'd do it if they paid him. She also disliked this and then walked off towards those troublemakers. Her dad tried to stop her, but he tripped over his crutches and fell, and then he told Okamura that he'd pay him if he helped them. Meanwhile, while those two ruffians were discussing what else they could loot, one of them got hit by a rock thrown by Coco, who then started insulting them. The crazy-haired troublemaker was really annoyed with this, and just as he was about to strike Coco with his sword, a long sword extended all the way to his neck, stopping him in that position, and we could see that this was Okamura that saved the girl from certain death. Coco was all happy, but our protagonist told her that he did it because he would be paid for this, and when the crazy-haired ruffian asked Okamura who he was, our protagonist ignored it and then went for an attack and took him down. And right then the other fat guy showed up, and without much delay, our protagonist flung himself at him, but when he sliced him, it only revealed that the fat guy had some protective suit, and the fatso got really angry with Okamura ripping his clothes. Our protagonist called him chubby, which insulted him, and then just as the fatso attacked, our protagonist evaded it and hit him in the leg, but then he realized that this fat dude was all armored up, as even his legs had some kind of protection. The chubby then swung his heavy fist at Okamura, but our protagonist was gone, only to show up behind the fatty. And when the fatso turned around, it was already too late for him, as our protagonist already activated his word magic heat that inflicted huge amount of pain on the guy so that he fell down, and when he was on the ground, our protagonist used another word magic harden on his own fist and then punched the fatso's face so hard that the ground under him broke. After that, a bit of silence took over, and then suddenly everyone started cheering our protagonist up. And just as Okamura was thinking how he even got XP from other adventurers, Coco's dad started complimenting him, and just when our protagonist thought that it wasn't a big deal since those guys were weak, Coco's dad told him that those two brothers were actually known to be skilled villains. Coco then teasingly punched our protagonist in the back, telling him that with his strength, he could have helped them from the beginning, but Okamura told her that he didn't do it for free, and then he gave her a slight punch on the head, adding that he just did it this time. Coco's dad then said that he'd give him some books and food as per their agreement, and he also invited our protagonist to his shop, which ended up being an armory full of all kinds of weapons and items. Coco's dad then gave Okamura a katana named the Piercer that he explained was invented by the Beastkin and that was known for its speed rather than its power. And as Coco's dad was further explaining more stuff about the Piercer, our protagonist was just surprised that those two hooligan brothers didn't steal such a valuable weapon, and Coco's dad then told him that he hid it, risking his life in that way as it was a special item. Hearing that it was that important, Okamura questioned Coco's dad's decision, but Coco's dad told him that he would feel better if our protagonist had it, and right then Coco showed up with a piece of some unidentified food thingy in a piece of wrapping that took Okamura a bit of time to figure out what it was. He gave it a try, and he actually really enjoyed it, which made Coco happy, even though she still disliked that he called her a brat, and when she heard our protagonist's name to be Hiro Okamura, she looked looked in awe at our protagonist and then just ran off as quick as she could. Later that night, our protagonist realized that fighting those two thugs leveled him up by 2 levels, which was a surprise, and besides that he also got an additional status called Awakened One, which was a step up from Traveler from Another World. Definitely a step up. His word magic also got an enhancement and became air writing, and without much waiting, he immediately tried it out by writing out a word float in the air and then projected it at a vase, which then started floating, and he was impressed that it worked at a distance as well, which was a real cheat. Now, things were going really well for him in this new town, as he got himself a book about the new world and also some new weapons. The next day, we see that Coco and her dad visited the inn where our protagonist was staying, only to find that Okamura already left, which made Coco sad because she baked him more of those cookies, but her dad assured her that they'd see him again as they found a new precious weapon for him again. In the meantime, we see the group of heroes thanking their coach Vale, where Chica and other girls were saying that their teamwork was pretty good and they already could see some progress. And just as Daishi started complaining about being exhausted, the Princess Lilith came out praising them, adding that the bath was ready for them. A bit later, we see the girls chatting with the princess in some luxurious bath, where she told them about the news she got from one of the villagers, where a guy that kinda fits the description of Okamura captured 2 thugs in Amos, but Chica thought that it was impossible that our protagonist would ever help anybody, and as girls wondered what Okamura was doing, we could see that our protagonist, now at a level 20, was already planning on going to his next destination, as he was getting closer to the border of the country, and the next location was Torchu mountain range. And as he was traveling, he realized that he was hungry and that he should have gotten more food from Amos, but right then he came across some edible looking fruits, and so he wanted to try it out, but as soon as he plucked it out, the root seemed to be a little creature that then let out a violently loud scream. And just a bit later, we see Okamura being chased by all kinds of monsters, and it happened because the plant he plucked was a so-called Torchu disaster plant that the receptionist warned him about quite descriptively, where its scream was able to attract all the nearby monsters, and he was an idiot enough to get it out. However, he wasn't sweating it and just used his air word magic to create a smoke screen that gave him enough time to escape. Okamura was confident he could take them all on, but he kinda got bewildered by so many of them showing up that he just escaped. But he still didn't solve his issue of being hungry, and right then he smelled the most incredible smell that was coming just behind the bush, and when he peeked through, he saw a small camp with an already prepared fish on a stick, and so he went there to satiate his hunger, but right as he was about to do that, somebody leaped from the tree, shouting to our protagonist to get away, and then punch landed exactly where our protagonist was, but Okamura escaped just in time. The guy named Arnold was all dramatic and angry at our protagonist trying to steal food from him, I mean rightfully so, and once Okamura accepted that the food was Arnold's, our protagonist then started bothering him, asking him for the fish, but Arnold just got really annoyed by this and refused. Seeing that Arnold wouldn't give him that fish, our protagonist was ready to fight for it, but right then, a little girl who Arnold called Muir, M-U-I-R. I have no clue how to pronounce it differently than Muir. I'm trying to pronounce it differently, but I can't. Anyways, when she came out, our protagonist saw her, and he then said that he'd settle it with just a bit of the fish, but his rude way of asking was unacceptable to Arnold, who then dashed forward and tried punching our protagonist, who managed to swiftly evade his attack. However, they were both impressed with each other's speed, and right before they continued their fight, they heard Muir scream, and when they looked at her, there was a huge bear-like monster towering over her, ready to grab her, but just before it could do that, Arnold showed up in front of the girl and cut the bear's paw off with a single swing. And just as Arnold, who was Muir's uncle, was telling the little girl to get away, another 4 monster bears showed up encircling them. Arnold had a way to take the bears down, but with Muir there, he couldn't risk it. Perfect in timing as always, our protagonist casually asked Arnold, that was busy with bears, if there was anything else than that fish, and when he looked, Arnold saw that the bear's paw that he cut off fell on that campfire of all places and crushed the freaking fish, which was why Okamura said that he'd leave because there was nothing else for him. As Arnold was struggling with the bears, he asked our protagonist for help, and when Okamura told him that he wouldn't do it for free, after realizing that he had slim chances against the bears, Arnold reluctantly offered our protagonist some special food if he helped them, but since Okamura had never heard about it before, Arnold had to explain that it was one of the best quality foods out there, and just then, as he was distracted, one of the bears grabbed hold of little Muir, and as it was about to eat her, a character for a word paralyzed showed up on Bear's hand, and it just dropped Muir down. Since it was a pretty big height, Arnold hurried up to catch her, but instead our protagonist swooped in like a cool cat and caught Muir in his arms. And I've always had a problem with people falling from great heights in movies, animes, cartoons, whatever. They're falling from great heights, they're gonna slam on the floor and die, but you catch them in your arms and somehow they survive. How? How? Please explain how. I mean, it's better than landing on the rock hard ground, but they're still falling from a great height and you're catching them. They should also either break your arms or break themselves and your arms together. I don't know, man. This fictional fantasy physics is something else. Anyways, Muir couldn't get her eyes off of our protagonist, so much so that our protagonist had to remind her to get up and go hide somewhere. Okamura then told Arnold to line the bears up, and even though reluctantly, the man did it by using a kind of a magic technique that conjured up swirling wind around his sword, and then using it he blew the bears into the air and then back down into a proper line. After which, our protagonist used his word magic extend to stab them all together like a skewer and then slam them to the ground. Okamura was pretty satisfied with how well his new katana worked for piercing through those bears, and Arnold was interested in what power our protagonist used, but Okamura reminded him that he better take care of Muir, and Arnold then dramatically ran off to her, who was hiding behind a rock, to check in on her, and he was relieved to see that she was good. And then our protagonist approached him and asked him about the special meat he was promised. And there is something magical about one guy promising another guy to give him his special meat that nobody knows nothing about. Anyways, Arnold was suddenly acting all dumb, which angered Okamura, who then reached for his blade. Seeing raging Okamura, Arnold said that it was just a joke. Chill, bro, you're gonna get my special meat. And when Arnold apologized to Muir because she wouldn't get better meat, she told him that she was fine with it, as Okamura did save her, adding that it tasted better anyways when eaten with other people. And Arnold went quick Super Saiyan with pride of Muir, hugging the life out of her, while our protagonist impatiently asked for food again. It wasn't too long after that when the food got ready, and our protagonist already got his first bite in, which took him to the heavens, but with some weird looking angels. He really enjoyed that food, and Arnold then said that the sauce was made by Muir, which made our protagonist compliment her, but also calling her a servant, which upset Arnold. After they finished their meals, they introduced themselves, where we learned that Arnold was a cook besides being an adventurer. When our protagonist heard that her surname was different, he asked the girl if she got kidnapped, which upset Arnold again, and then Arnold explained that he found her in one of the villages, but before continuing, he added that he considered her his daughter now. Our protagonist didn't care too much about them, and then when he mentioned in his introduction that he was a book reader, Muir started laughing, which Arnold considered kawaii, and so our protagonist started accusing him of being into little girls, which upset him again. Our protagonist started realizing that there was something weird about their behavior, like the way they were reacting to his insults and their responses, but it was one phrase by which our protagonist confirmed that Muir wasn't a human but a beastkin, and they were shocked that he knew. And then Okamura casually pointed out Muir's tail and the hat with which she was hiding her ears. Arnold scolded her for not being careful enough, and then started begging our protagonist not to tell anyone that Muir was a beastkin, since she didn't do anything bad, had, and our protagonist told him that he couldn't care less about it as there were more important things, like reading books and eating good food. I mean, if you replace reading books with playing video games, this is me. Arnold was lost for words and then started awkwardly laughing, which made our protagonist threaten him with stabbing. Arnold was relieved, and then showing his own tail, he told our protagonist that he too was a beastkin. Despite Okamura telling him that he wasn't interested in their story, Arnold continued telling him the story of how they were on their way to their continent, and then how his ears got stolen when he was a slave. When he saw that our protagonist didn't know about the practice of slavery there, he went on to tell him that not too long before, humans created slavery system and enslaved a lot of beastkin that didn't have strength or political powers to fight back. The slaves were engraved with magical crests that prevented them from resisting, and since Arnold was also captured, his ears were cut off, so now he was wearing these fake ears to hide his true identity on the human continent. Okamura was interested in how Arnold was able to escape if he had that magic crest on him, and Arnold told him that it was because his master died, where they were saved by some good human. Our protagonist was pretty scary as he was thinking of the ways he'd take revenge on those enslaving him. However, Arnold was just happy that he got away, and then he asked where was Okamura heading, and he was pretty shocked when he learned that our protagonist was also crossing the border, and then our protagonist told him that despite the hectic situation in their world, he just didn't care about it and did whatever he wanted. Arnold found Okamura a pretty interesting guy, and then our protagonist asked the girl if she could take off her hat. Muir was pretty embarrassed, but she eventually did it, and our protagonist was curiously checking her ears out, thinking to himself that he was lucky that he met some beastkin sooner. Imagine if in the beastkin world, ears are like up high in our world. My bro would be in prison right now. Now Arnold, seeing that Muir was uncomfortable with our protagonist staring like that, he moved in front of her to block Okamura's view, and then got up and changed the subject, telling our protagonist that they should go together as if it was fate, also suggesting that our protagonist should follow him. Okamura didn't like the way he said it, but he agreed, and as they were on their way, Arnold asked our protagonist of his level, adding that even though he was strong for a human, his battle movement looked like he lacked experience. Our protagonist thought that this was pretty accurate, and then he used his air word magic to see Arnold's stats that showed him that Arnold was a level 31 with an attribute of wind, and also what he found strange was that under the magic art it said trick art, which was why he didn't feel any magic when Arnold fought those bears. Okamura didn't fully trust them, but he decided to continue his journey with them for the time being, and when he revealed his level, Arnold was all flexing, saying that he was better, which was topped by our protagonist calling him a lolicon hentai and telling him that there were other things beside a level, and this created another tension between them. But then Muir got in and showed them where they should go next. However, the taunting and teasing continued between these two man-children, and not too long after, they finally arrived at the Wando village, only to find it completely destroyed by the beastkin, as locals explained. We then learned that the beastkin in that village were attacked by some group that wanted to arrest them. We also learned that all of the beastkin were killed, which devastated Arnold, who got even more upset once he learned that this group's name was the Beastkin's Cage, which he actually recognized. The storm was raging outside, and our protagonist was reading a book, and just as he was about to say something to Arnold, Arnold went bananas and started screaming and saying that nothing would change if he just sat there all depressed, and then our protagonist told him that he couldn't care less about him and that he just wanted to call a doctor to report that he went crazy. And for some reason Arnold found our protagonist's insults comforting, which was weird to me and our protagonist as well. And then Okamura asked him if they'd arrive at a border soon, and Arnold told him that since they weren't in any hurry, they'd just continue as they were. Okamura found his optimism amusing, and Arnold said that he was different when it came to Muir, and our protagonist used this to tease him about being a lolicon, completely triggering him. Muir was also telling our protagonist that he was being a meanie, but Okamura just turned around and continued reading his book. The next day we see that Arnold wanted to sell some loot that he got from monsters, but Okamura told him that they already had enough money money, but Arnold found it wasteful to throw it away, and before he realized, our protagonist was already on his way away from him as he was bored listening to him, and also to get some food stuff and books. But both Muir and Arnold joined him, and when they got into the general store, there was some huge bald guy panicking over the store owner not having the exact item Arnold had a bag of, and as soon as Muir mentioned, the baldy got all aggressive, but he quickly calmed down and apologized to them for his behavior, explaining that his daughter got bitten by a venomous bug, and so he needed those bee's needle items. The baldy also told them that he'd get them some stuff in return, so he wouldn't take it for free, which was our protagonist's concern, and then they parted ways. Sometimes later, they arrived at a new town called Palettos, and as they were discussing how they'd stay there for the night, they heard some noise, and so they went that way, where they found a crowd of people gathering around something, and when he got a peek, Arnold recognized that those men were wearing a symbol of that Beastkin's cage group. Arnold then told our protagonist that they should leave that place, but right then one of those cloaked Beastkin cage guys commanded everyone to stop moving as they were about to search everyone because they believed that there was a Beastkin in their town. However, our protagonist got occupied with a book that he saw in this group's carriage and wanted to get it, but he couldn't use his magic for it right then. The cloaked men then went around asking everyone to take off their hat, and one of them eventually came to Arnold and Muir, and so he ordered Arnold to take off Muir's hat, and just when Arnold thought that he'd have to fight, someone else drew their attention, and it was another Beastkin lady with her daughter, and just as reported, there were two of them, so the cloaked men quickly arrested them, and as they were taking them, a boy from behind Muir shouted that Muir had a tail, and this attracted everyone's attention. My bro is about to get stitches because that's what snitches get. So one of the cloaked men was already rushing towards them, telling them to stay put. Muir was crying and Arnold was already reaching for his sword, and then some important looking guy from this group came in, telling Arnold that he'd die if he protected the beast folk. Arnold quickly realized that this dude was stronger than the rest, and our protagonist was also thinking if he had to jump in to help, but it was troublesome as Arnold and Muir were now being surrounded. Arnold told the group leader that humans and beast folk were equal, but Eyepatch leader responded to him that beastkin should be hated just as demonkin for their very existence, and he said even worse things which utterly triggered Arnold, that then dashed at the leader in blind rage to attack him, only to realize that Muir already got captured because of it, but as soon as he turned around, he got hit in the head by the Eyepatch leader that told him that he should have valued his life more as a human, and then ordered his men to throw the beast folk, including Muir, into the cage, and Arnold could only helplessly look at what was going on as he was losing his consciousness. And then we could see as the group of beastskin cagemen were walking away, our protagonist was holding Muir's hat and saying that he didn't like them. 2 hours later, we see that Arnold woke up and he was already ready to go after the group that kidnapped Muir, but our protagonist told him that that wouldn't be the best way of doing it. This irritated Arnold, who then grabbed our protagonist, asking him for a better plan, but Okamura then punched him in the gut, telling him that if he was able to do that, then he had no chance, and then seeing Arnold getting emotional, he told him that the Beastkin Cage group was still in the town, as they were supposed to meet someone there. Arnold heard enough and was about to leave the place, and after hearing that our protagonist wasn't willing to help, he didn't want to provide any info about this group Okamura was interested in, and so our protagonist had to remind him that he brought his dead frog looking ass back to their inn, adding that he also gave him info. Arnold knew that he was right, and so he quickly told him how the Beastkin Cage organization's goal was to completely eradicate or capture Beastkin, and they were also pretty strong since they were fighting Beastkin who were naturally stronger than humans, and he was actually captured by them. Arnold was also curious why Okamura was interested in them, and our protagonist told him that he cared about a book that he saw with them, and he thought that that book maybe contained some interesting things. Arnold found this weird and wanted to go save Muir, and our protagonist was thinking to himself that he had some benefits from Arnold and Muir, like their cooking and also their knowledge of the beastkin, so he wasn't ready to let it go, and besides that, he could use the commotion to steal that book from the bad guys, so he wouldn't even feel bad about it, and so he decided to go with Arnold to get that book or less importantly, to save Muir. Meanwhile, we see Muir crying in a carriage, thinking to herself that she was a burden to Arnold and that his life would be easier without her. Why does every single anime girl, after getting captured like this, always thinks she is the burden for other guy, usually our protagonist, but in this case Arnold? Anyways, her thoughts were interrupted by a little beastskin girl asking her mom if they'd really die and if it was true that beast folk were that terrible, and her mom then apologized to Muir for dragging her into that mess. And when Muir saw the little girl all sad, she decided that she had to be strong for the sake of that girl and also for Arnold and her parents. And then smiling, she told the little girl that even though she too was terrified, there was a hero in that town that save them if they just believed in him, and this really did brighten up the mood. And in the meantime, we see both Arnold and our protagonist rushing to save Muir and, well, get the book. And while that was going on, we see that the leader of the Beastskin Cage organization, Falsey, was meeting up with a chubby guy named Aporo, who was struggling with heat because my bro was just too fat. I'm sorry, I had to say it. And this meeting was about Falsey showing him the beastskin that they caught, and Aporo was pretty happy with what Falsey had for him, praising him for always getting him the best goods. And this time he was especially pleased with Muir, as she was one of the rare silver wolves. Muir was terrified when she saw this chubby dude staring at her like that, and she got scared that she was gonna get eaten. And he was also pretty happy with the mother and daughter duo, as they were both catkin that Aporo really liked. When Falsey saw that Aporo was satisfied with the purchase, he showed him the paper where he'd imprint his mana, and just when creepy Aporo was about to do it, the paper suddenly burned, and then Falsey's men started calling him, and we could see that it was our protagonist that used his air word magic to burn that paper, and Arnold was approaching them, commandingly telling them that he came for Muir. The little girl and Muir peered through the carriage, and when Arnold saw them, he knew that they were safe. And then Falsey told Arnold that he obviously didn't care much about his own life, and then Arnold suddenly turned around and showed off his tail, telling Falsey that he was dumb for not realizing that he too was a beastskin. Falsey and his men were shocked seeing this, and so Falsey asked him about his ears, and Arnold told him how he lost them. And he... I can't read this with a straight face. I've been trying a couple of times, but there's something so funny about a guy losing his ears as if they were a pair of socks. Anyways, Arnold told him how he lost them and how he was wearing fake ears now, but this was all a distraction that was supposed to give our protagonist enough time to sneak behind them, as he used his word magic to hide himself and get into one of the carriages, where the books were, of course, not the girls. In there he found some interesting books that he thought useful, but he also found some inappropriate ones that he, as a Giga Chad, thought straight away. And then he used his magic to teleport his now neatly packaged books outside, which was a bit tricky, but he managed to do it. And now as he was thinking of dealing with Arnold's request, we could see Arnold facing Falsey, who was surprised that Arnold was a beastskin. Falsey offered Arnold to Aporo, but Aporo was just into beast women, of course, and then Falsey started talking trash to Arnold, and Arnold told him that he wouldn't lose again. Falsey, then ordering his men to attack, told Arnold that beastskin had no chance against humans that could use magic, and then a bunch of his hooded men started firing off some fireballs at Arnold, who used his trick art, explosive wind claw, to neutralize all of it. And just when Arnold thought that he had an upper hand in that battle, sleazy Falsey used the carriages so that Arnold couldn't use his wind power against him, which was a real cowardly move, even though Falsey was thinking he was being strategic, I guess. And then his men started firing off another round of fireballs at Arnold, and Falsey used this opportunity to attack Arnold until he got tired, and then even triggered him by threatening him with Aporo using the beastskin girls that they captured. This really did it for Arnold, that then dashed at them with full power, catching Falsey off guard, who kept saying that Arnold would hit carriages as well, but Arnold didn't care this time and just went forward, releasing his mighty wind technique that blew everything up. Arnold thought that he dealt with everyone, but when the smoke settled, Falsey was still standing, which impressed Arnold, and he was telling Arnold that he was as cruel as he expected, doing that to his own species, but Arnold just smiled and told him that his kind were safe, and right then Muir called out to Arnold, which shocked Falsey, and they were all safe. with our protagonist standing with them. Falsey wanted to know how they got the key and who our protagonist was, and Arnold too was interested in that, but he was sure that he had an upper hand now because Falsey was the only man left standing. However, Falsey was pretty confident that he could handle Beastkin by himself, and he sure proved his confidence with his intense killing intent. Just before he was about to attack Arnold, Muir jumped in front of Arnold and said that she'd protect him, and this annoyed Falsey even more, that then conjured up some kind of swirling magic in his hand that turned into a flame bullet as he sent it at Arnold and Muir as well. Arnold took Muir in the very last moment, and there was a huge explosion, but just a moment later, as the explosion settled, Falsey could see that Arnold evaded that attack and he protected Muir as well. Okamura realized that Falsey wasn't a joke when he checked his stats, where Falsey was level 58 with a bunch of fire-based attacks. Our protagonist was thinking to himself that Arnold would be in a big trouble if he didn't help, since there was a huge level difference, and just then he realized that something was burning next to him, and when he suddenly realized what it was, he shouted really loud that both Arnold and Falsey turned their heads towards him, and we could see that he was now using his word magic to cool down the area, but it was already too late as his books were burned to a crisp. He was absolutely devastated by this, and as he picked up those charred books, they just crumbled to nothing in his hands, and then he went full crazy, raging and then suddenly sending the coldest killing intent at Falsey for destroying his precious book that technically aren't even his because he stole them. Falsey recognized those books, but our protagonist was already quickly pacing towards him with his word magic speed activated, and before he realized what was going on, our protagonist already attacked him with his extended sword, which made Falsey realize that Okamura was a big deal. Watching them fight, Arnold noticed that they were really fast, and then suddenly Falsey got even faster and appeared right behind our protagonist, where one of his eyes was glowing bright, and he caught our protagonist off guard by slashing his back a little bit. Okamura quickly withdrew from Falsey that now had a weird looking eye where his eye patch was, telling our protagonist that he took his death. Our protagonist took notice of the eye, and Falsey told him that it was forced on him by the Beastkin as a constant reminder of the pain they gave him that now turned into hate, and then he fiercely attacked our protagonist again. He then continued saying that he'd never forgive them for what they did, and then sent a heavy punch blowing our protagonist back, and then quickly dashing after him, grabbing him by his throat and sending a barrage of fists at our protagonist while telling him that it was unforgivable for him to defend the Beastkin. Okamura was aware that if this kept going for a bit longer, his HP would be gone, and just as he was about to use his word magic, Falsey snatched his other hand in a second, telling him that using his eyes he could see every single movement from our protagonist. Okamura now understood that this guy increased both his visibility and his physical power with that eye, and it seemed that he was stronger than his stats said. And right as Falsey was about to deal a final strike to our protagonist, Arnold threw his sword at Falsey with everything he had, but Falsey easily defended it and casually fired off a beam of fire that blasted Arnold all the way back. And as Muir was trying to put out the fire from Arnold, Falsey was telling him that he was a weak nuisance just like the other Beastkin he killed earlier was, and it was at this point that Arnold realized that grave belonged to the Beastkin that Falsey murdered. And just as they were arguing, our protagonist attracted Falsey's attention by telling him that he understood him, and then when Falsey turned around, our protagonist already activated his word magic light that destroyed Falsey's dark eye. Okamura was thinking that Arnold did him a big favor and then got up and started punching Falsey, finishing with a powerful blow to the face and then telling him that he repaid his debt from earlier. Falsey then hysterically started shouting that it made no sense for our protagonist to stand on their enemy's side as a human, and also to say that the books were his treasure when he literally stole them a couple of moments ago, but our protagonist retorted that he didn't care about that and just wanted to destroy him for messing with his fun. And right at that moment, the little Beastkin girl named Uru started insulting Falsey, calling him all kinds of names, which triggered Falsey I bit myself. Which triggered Falsey so much that he immediately attacked them with his fire magic. However, just as fire magic was reaching them, Muir leapt to protect Uru. Here's one more proof that I'm not an AI. I don't know why people tell me sometimes, not often, but sometimes in the comments that they didn't even realize that I was a real human and not an AI voice. Or maybe this is just a script written that way so AI would read it and say, oh, I beat myself. Mind games. Anyways, back to the story. The blast was so big that Arnold thought that both of the girls were done, but then just a moment later, as the smoke cleared off, to Arnold and Falsey's shock, we could see our protagonist standing there with both girls in his arms, telling them that they should hide somewhere since they were a burden. Muir was concerned with his arm as his shoulder had a burn injury, but Okamura insisted that it was nothing and that they should just go away. Muir tried to thank him, but seeing his face, she got scared, and the girls went running to Arnold and Lady Beastkin. Our protagonist then told Falsey that he couldn't allow his clients getting hurt, and even though he dislikes this situation, Falsey knew that our protagonist wouldn't be able to use one arm now, but that quickly changed as our protagonist used his word magic healing on his shoulder and it swiftly healed up. Falsey found it strange that he could use the light magic from earlier, even though he wasn't a ghost kin, and now healing too. But Okamura wasn't interested in revealing his secret. Falsey then conjured up a bunch of those fireballs and sent them all at our protagonist and caused a huge explosion which worried everyone. And right from the flames of that fire, our protagonist flew up running at Falsey. However, Falsey said that he expected this and then spawned another fireball, but before he was able to fire it, our protagonist neutralized it using his word magic cool down, and this shocked Falsey as he had no clue what happened to his flame bullet, and our protagonist was already casting another magic, this time on the ground, where soil stuck to Falsey's legs and he couldn't move. He was completely flabbergasted as he realized that Okamura could also use earth magic, but then our protagonist started punching the hell out of him, citing books that got destroyed as the reason for each of the next punches. Watching this, Arnold just thought that it was better if he didn't mess with our protagonist's books in the future. Falsey still showed some will to fight back, but he was done for, as Okamura found it poetic for a fire user to be defeated by fire, and then using his word magic, he burned Falsey until he brought him to the ground. As Okamura was walking away from him, telling him that he taught him a lesson, barely able to speak, Falsey wanted to know who our protagonist was, and Okamura just told him that he has a special kind of a cheat. Falsey then started threatening them with a revenge, but when our protagonist told him that he was butt naked, he dropped back down to the ground, continuing his rant, and this annoyed our protagonist, who then picked up a stone and hit him in the head, which took him to a dreamland right away. Our protagonist was pretty impressed with Falsey's will to fight and his resistance as well. A bit later, we see everyone thanking our protagonist for saving them, and him saying that he did it as a request, and he also reminded Arnold of the special ingredients he owed him now. And while our protagonist was healing himself up, Arnold was thinking to himself how our protagonist used some strange form of magic, and he wondered what he was writing when he used his magic, but he recognized that it wasn't the best time for asking this now. And right as they were about to go, that hentai fatso Aporo started shouting to them from the back that the reinforcements would be coming soon and that they should just hand in the Beastkin girls which he pined for so much. Right then that Baldy from before showed up, which Arnold immediately recognized, and he grabbed Aporo, telling him that the woman and the child he was mentioning were his wife and daughter, and then he gave him such an uppercut that sent him flying into the sky. He was literally going to space. You don't need a rocket, you just need an uppercut from this Baldy guy. Arnold, Muir, and our protagonist were just standing there in utter shock at seeing this. We then learned that a few weeks ago, Baldy was hurt and was walking through the forest with every moment risking fainting and crashing down, and then in the distance he saw a house where he decided to take a rest. But before he could get there, he already fainted, only to wake up sometimes later with Ura and her mom taking care of him. He got in love the moment he saw her, and they eventually got married. This was all surprising to Arnold, that never heard of a human marrying a beastkin lady, and a widow on top of that as well. Baldy was happy that his family was safe, and Uru told him that it was thanks to our protagonist, just like Muir told her, but Muir actually meant Arnold, and they all introduced to the Baldy, and when Uru called Arnold uncle, he thought that even though he was fine with it, he still wasn't that old, but our protagonist disagreed. Suddenly, a growling noise came from our protagonist, and both Baldy and Arnold immediately got into a battle position, only to find find out that our protagonist's stomach was making noises because he was hella hungry. Bully's wife then said that it was time for her to show her cooking skills and repay her debt to her saviors, and she wanted both Uru and Muir to help her, and Arnold too, being a cook himself, couldn't just stand there doing nothing. In the meantime, we see that a word came to Okamura's hero classmates that a guy with a red cape, which reminded them of our protagonist, was doing some good deeds, taking down Beastskin's cage organization and stuff like that. We also learned that the other girls thought that the reason Chica was so mean when talking about our protagonist was because she secretly liked him, but she kept denying it. And now back to our protagonist. They prepared a surprising amount of food for him of all kinds, and he found it all delicious. And as he was eating, the Baldy, whose name we now learn to be Rav, and Arnold were admiring the cuteness of Muir and Uru while they were munching on their food and arguing which one was cuter, and it was Rav's wife that had to tell them to stop arguing and that they were both cute. And while that was going on, Uru approached our protagonist and started complimenting him, and then suggested that they should get married, which freaked out Muir. Uru then continued saying that she'd become beautiful just like her mom. This worried Rav, but Arnold assured him that they'd soon go on a journey, and so that there was nothing he should worry about, and instead he would have to deal with him. And after that delicious meal, they already said their byes to each other, and our protagonist, together with Arnold and Muir, were ready to leave for their journey. But before that, Arnold wanted to know if our protagonist felt safe traveling with them, because the Beastskin cage were after them, and he was thinking that they might wait for them at the border, which would cause them some serious problems. Okamura then told him that before he went with them, he already considered a possibility that they'd be pursued, and despite it, he decided to go with them, and he wasn't about to blame others for his own decisions now. And he was also thinking to himself that he owed it to Arnold, as he helped him back there, and only when they were even would he go his own way, and plus it was more interesting this way. And right then Muir bowed down and apologized to our protagonist for causing them trouble, and sloppily thanked him. Okamura told her that it wasn't an issue, and then put her hat back on her, which made her panic, and then he told her that she should work on getting stronger if she didn't like the situation. And he also sent a few insults to Arnold for being a lolicon hentai, which triggered Arnold, and so the bickering started as they went on. But our protagonist was thinking to himself how he finally looked forward to this journey. Sometimes later, as they reached Rocky Mountains, they came across a hot spring, onsen, and decided to relax themselves a bit. And just as Arnold was admiring how cute Muir looked in her swimsuit, I mean, he's having some sus vibes now, not gonna lie. Something fell right behind Muir at that moment, causing a huge splash, and we soon learned that it was a person. After they took her out of the water, they realized that it was what seemed like a human girl, and she was unconscious. Arnold was trying to wake her up, but our protagonist took him as being an old hentai guy, and then as Arnold was trying to justify himself to Muir, Okamura stepped in, thinking that using a word magic wake would do the trick. But just as he placed his hand down, the mysterious girl just bit on his hand, which looked really sus. And just a bit later, we see that this girl already woke up and was acting all familiar with our protagonist, which he didn't like. She introduced herself as Y, and then fell flat to the ground, saying that she was starving. Muir then told her that she could join them as they were hunting for a cow crab, which Arnold confirmed was pretty tasty, and it wasn't too long before she agreed. As they were walking, we learned that Y was traveling by herself in search of a person that made a spear that she had on herself called Bone Maiden of Victory. Muir was fascinated with this spear and wondered who made it, and Y then told them that it was her dad, and then gesturing, it turned out her dad might have been a beastkin, as Arnold suggested. Our protagonist found it intriguing that even though her dad was a beastkin, she looked nothing like them, and she told him that she was more like her mother. Arnold suggested that she might be a half-breed, but Y had no clue what that was. Our protagonist was interested in how this worked, and Arnold explained that half-breeds that took after their human parents would completely look like humans, while if they took after their beastkin parents, they'd look even more animal-like than the beastkin themselves. Y was worried that they'd be scared of her because she was a half-breed and a taboo, and because our protagonist didn't know what she meant, Arnold explained that half-breeds were known as taboos or monsters because they couldn't use either trick arts nor magic from either race, and so they were alienated. But then, showing Y that both he and Muir were beastkin, they told her that there was no reason for them to be afraid of her. And Muir made sure Y felt better by telling her that she wasn't a monster. However, Y was still curious about Okamura, and Arnold explained that our protagonist didn't care about races, but only about food and books. To change the subject, our protagonist asked Arnold to go get the food, calling him lolicon, which Y quickly picked up and then asked uncomfortable questions, and Arnold got really annoyed for being misunderstood. And sometimes later, as soon as they got on the top, they already found one of those cow crabs near the lake, and Arnold considered it really lucky because those were some easily frightened creatures that usually wouldn't come out to the lake, and since he thought that it'd be difficult finding more of them, he suggested that our protagonist can use his word magic to help them out, but Okamura just kicked him in the water, telling him that it was his job to do that as a repayment for his help with Beastkin Cage organization, and he had the scariest face on where even the girls thought him terrifying. And Arnold was trying to convince our protagonist to help him out, but then he heard some noise coming from under the water, and then he suddenly got lifted up by something huge, which our protagonist thought was a cow crab's boss, but Arnold told him that it was just a bunch of those crabs together imitating a big one, where we learned that they do it if they felt afraid. Arnold then told Okamura that they'd have to fight, and even though our protagonist was reluctant, he told the girls to back away, and just then the giant crab fired off his hydraulic cutters at our protagonist, but Okamura already had his defenses up, so he didn't go through, and just then Y ran past him and fearlessly dashed at the giant crab, cutting its legs in a second, and then landing really gracefully and then spinning her spear. As they continued fighting the giant crab monster, both our protagonist and Arnold were impressed with Y, while Muir got even more motivated to grow stronger one day, just like our protagonist told her to. Seeing a good opening, Okamura told Y and Arnold to move away, and then used his word magic first oil and then spark in his new technique parallel write-in release to set it on fire and to eliminate it. As he was walking away from the burning monster, he wasn't looking at the fire like cool guys do. We thought he used fire, but Arnold explained that it was a unique magic where our protagonist would just draw some words out and magic would happen. She found our protagonist fascinating, and then sniffing the air, she figured out that Okamura was using oil, and Arnold was impressed with her as he, one of the beastkin with the beast sense of smell, dogkin, couldn't pick up that smell, and she could. Y didn't know her dad's race, and it was interesting to Arnold that there was someone with a better smell than him. We then learned that there were three main beastkin races that were considered to be a myth, where one of them was the golden fox, a powerful species that could manipulate its own size and even beastify, which was something no other species could do without going completely wild. Our protagonist thought it a shame that they went extinct. Arnold went cooking the crab, even though it was already pretty cooked by Okamura's fire magic, and not too long after, we see them enjoying the cow crab meat, and we learn that Y set out on her journey when she was just 7, and she's been traveling for about another 7 years. We also learned that she was usually traveling alone most of the time, but then occasionally found someone to go with, but as soon as she told them about herself, they would abandon her, which was why she was so glad that she ran into this group that accepted her. Muir wanted to know more about her dad, but besides that spear, she had no other information about him, and her mom also told her that somebody wanted her dad gone, and so he escaped to protect his family, which was why she was on this journey, to find her father so that she could protect him, and this was the reason why she became strong as well. I mean, running away from your family to save them sounds kind of weird, but I guess it beats going to buy milk and never coming back any day of the week. Anyways, hearing this made both Arnold and Muir impressed with her, and Arnold gave her a generous pat on the head, and then White turned towards Okamura, expecting a pat from him as well, but he refused, saying that even though he understood her reasons, it was her choice to go that path, and she didn't do it for praise. So she agreed with our protagonist, but still insisted on a pat. Because why not? And this bold approach of her shocked Muir. As Arnold was checking on what was wrong with Muir, Okamura told Y that he wouldn't pet nobody for no reason, but Y kept on insisting and insisting, saying that she'd do anything to deserve a pet, and just as he kept refusing, Y kept insisting with her intense stare until our protagonist finally gave up and told her that he'd pat her head if she did something good. Y got really excited about this, but then she realized that she had no clue what he meant by something good, but our protagonist wanted her to figure it out by herself. This kinda reminds me of a joke, a prank in my language, in my country, where you would ask somebody, do you know how to keep an idiot impatient? And if they say no, how? You answer them by saying, I'll tell you tomorrow, and that's all there is to it. Anyways, that's all for today's video, bros. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Ever since we reached 100k subscribers, we've been going incredibly fast, gaining almost 20k subscribers in less than a month. You bros are amazing. Thank you so much. And why I'm saying this right now is because at the end of this month, 27th of January, was the date when I first uploaded my first video ever on YouTube last year. So it's gonna be a year ever since I uploaded my first video ever, and we're already over 100k subscribers, already at almost 120k subscribers. You bros are amazing. Thank you for all the amazing support. Always stay awesome like this, and peace.